And Gary, could you tell us the story that you tell about how the resurrection has really impacted your life when you were going through a very difficult time with your wife? Tell that story to us.
My wife, it was over pretty quickly, but my wife had been sick for a few months. We had no idea what it was. And when they finally sent us for testing, they'd already sent us for other tests, but when they sent us for the final testing that discovered it, turned out she had stage 4 stomach cancer, and she died 4 months later. That's all she lived. But before she got sick, I had done some publishing on the subject of doubt. And in one of those publications, I was reflecting on Job and Job's talking with God in Job 38. And I made this make-believe scenario what my Job 38 would be if I got to ask Job my questions. What would it look like? And I had published that. And 3 years later, she got sick. And so I thought, oh my, for crying out loud, I can't believe this. Now I have to see, does the advice I give in this earlier document really work when I'm going through the fire? And so we got back from the hospital, where they told us there's nothing they could do for her, and she was terminal. And the kids were in school. It was the first week in May of 1995. She was upstairs sleeping because she was given a medicine for stomach cancer that made her sleep 17, 18 hours a day. And I put a child monitor up there and went out and sat on the front porch. It was starting to get warm, and I had my Job 38. And I literally sat there and thought, wow, this is my day in the sun. I can think like Job 38. And I had this make-believe conversation, only now it was the same one I had in 3 years earlier with the resurrection, but now it was spiced in a way by my wife's obvious dying. And she didn't live too much longer. But as I sat there on the porch, imagining what God would say to me, I would start by saying, Lord, why is Debbie upstairs dying? I mean, she's 43 years old, and she's the mother of our 4 children, and I thought you called me to ministry, but how can I minister, and how can I teach, and how can I publish if my kids need breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and they need their clothes washed? We had 4 children. And if they have to have their homework done at night, how can I get anything done? And so I said, why her? Why now? Why this? And she's my best friend. And in my Job 38, the way I saw that is that the Lord would have said to me, you know, Gary, I appreciate this. I appreciate your laying this out, but I've got a question for you. What kind of a world is this? Now, notice that's how Job 38 starts too. Where were you when I created the foundation of the world? And I pictured the version for me would be, what kind of a world is this? And I didn't know what to say, and she's dying, and I didn't want to play theology. And so I said, well, Lord, I don't know. I'll tell you in terms of my own studies. It's a world where your son came to earth, died for our sins, was raised from the dead, and we can have a lot to hope for because of this. And he said to me, in my imagination, the Lord said, oh, it's a good start. That's a good place to start. And, you know, I know what you're going through. Well, I'd read a lot of literature and later wrote a book on grief, and I knew that's the last thing you say to somebody who's dying. I know what you're going through. Even if you did go through what they went through, the problem is they could look at you and say, yeah, but you're over it. I'm not. I'm in the middle of it. So don't talk to me about this. Well, I picture God saying to me, I know what you're going through. And I thought, all right, how so? And he said, well, I watched my son die. And I said, I'd already been told it was terminal, but I hoped there was a way out for her. And so I was shocked when he said that. And I said, wait a minute. Are you telling me that as you watched your son die, I'm going to have to watch Debbie die? And I pictured him saying to me, son, you're going to go through some deep water. But someday, you will be, as the last card I put away after she passed away, the last card said, how are you going to feel someday when you're talking about the yellow brick road finally issuing into the Emerald City? The card said, how are you going to feel walking down the streets of heaven, hand in hand with your wife. And I'm telling you guys, when I read that card, I thought I was going to die. When I opened that card up, I couldn't repeat those words for a year. Mm-hmm. You'll be able to walk down the streets of heaven hand in hand with your wife. And so I picture God saying to me in the words of that card, I pictured him saying, Gary, you got some deep waters to go through, but one day you and Debbie will be in the kingdom together with us, and it'll be a glorious time. But I can't explain it all right now, but just keep that truth ever before you. And basically, that was a shortened version of the conversation. Later, I told the story again. That was the 3-year earlier story that I published with her death put into it. And so I interpreted her death as my sending my greatest gift home to heaven. And it would have been the other way around if it had been me that died. But I sent my greatest gift home where she couldn't be touched. In the words of 1 Peter 1:3 and following there, nobody can take this away from me. She can't be hurt anymore. Nobody can steal this. It's garrisoned in the halls of heaven. Yes, it's horrible, but yes, she's safe. And yes, it's forever. And yes, it's about reunion. And metaphorically, because that conversation never took place, but with the Lord. But metaphorically, yeah, that's what the resurrection meant to me. So it's symbolized. It's not great right now, but this is, as philosophers have said down through the ages, this is not the best of all possible worlds, but it's the best way to achieve the best of all possible worlds. And I knew I was going to have to get on with the achieving part.
Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that with us, Gary.
You're welcome.